Hey everybody, welcome inside another edition of the Celtics Roundtable podcast on CLNS Radio. CLNS Radio, the leading online provider of audio-video coverage of the Barstool Celtics. Evan Valenti, you guys here on a Friday morning, joined by Barstool Sports' Dan Greenberg at Stool Green if you want to follow him on Twitter. Of course, on barstoolsports.com. You can find all of his blogs there. I just want to preface this before we get into this thing. Recorded Thursday night before the Atlanta game and before it was a really hard game to watch. So without further ado, here is Dan Greenberg of Barstool Sports.
You know, you look at this game, again, a 114-91 loss to the hands of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think I'm shocked that Boston just didn't look ready at all for this game. The energy wasn't there. You look at defensively, they were communicating. Offensively, they were hitting shots. I think there were times, like I was even shocked Wednesday night when LeBron would take Jay Crowder one-on-one and just go right through him. Did anyone besides Isaiah Thomas, who had 20 points in the game, and it was a rough 20, but at least he had 20, anybody play well in this game in your estimation, Dan? Are you as shocked as I was?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, even Isaiah had his struggles at times, especially shooting from behind the arc. So I wouldn't even say anybody played well. And what's disappointing about that is, like you said, Jay Crowder was like a matador. You had Kelly Olynyk like barely reaching, trying to stop LeBron. You had Avery Bradley reaching. It was a really weird strategy that we haven't seen them sort of use against LeBron in any of their previous meetings. So it wasn't necessarily that they lost, but it was more how they lost. We can live with the fact where if the Celtics are giving a full effort and it goes down to the wire and LeBron or Kyrie makes a play, so be it. But to play so disinterested and lifeless like they did, especially coming off 2 days rest, I mean, it's really inexcusable at the least.
Yeah, and what the thing is this is a type of game that Boston usually plays well in. They always play Golden State pretty tough. They hang with San Antonio for a while until San Antonio picks them apart in some fashion offensively. They usually get up for Cleveland. Again, the teams that are like Houston, they've had no troubles keeping up with. It's just normally the upper echelon teams of the NBA, Boston's usually right there, and this was like what felt like the first case in a while where you expected a big effort out of Boston. They're looking to obviously make a huge statement, try to hold on to the number one overall seed in the Eastern Conference, and it just played like a dud, and there was no end to the bleeding in sight. Like, you go down the list, Jay had a bad game, Horford wasn't terrific, Marcus Smart's in a weird funk right now, Jaylen Brown was not doing anything really well, Terry Rozier played terrible minutes. Kelly Olynyk had a great spurt late when nobody cared about the game. Like, you go down the roster, and it was just garbage from everybody. So in that kind of light, when you get ready to, kind of tune things up for this playoff run, if you're Brad, you got to have a sense of urgency at this point. Say, look, when the best teams, when it comes down to it, they play their best basketball at the end of the year, and that wasn't our best basketball. We got to get rid of that mentality. We have to continue to put our best foot forward, and we have to get better now. We can't wait for this. We don't have the ability to quote unquote turn on the switch, which is my least favorite phrase in sports, and I've heard it so many times the past couple of days. But they don't have the ability to just say, "Oh yeah, we can always figure it out later." They don't, because this is not that kind of team.
Yeah, and I put this on the site, after the game. Really, I looked at it as it was just a very uncharacteristic Celtics loss. Like you said, normally we see them overlook a team like Phoenix or the Nuggets or Philadelphia. They lose those type of games. But if you remember, there was that big, showdown in the beginning of March against Washington that they came to playing and played great. You mentioned the Golden State. Even the previous Cleveland win at the beginning of the month, it's uncharacteristic of them to come into a game that everyone has been hyping for, even themselves. They're all looking for it on the calendar, and to be so ill-prepared, and really, like you said, it was everyone on the roster. So when Brad Stevens starts that second quarter with that all-bench lineup, Cleveland scored to make it 21-20, 13 seconds into the second quarter, and then didn't trail again for the entire game. So everybody, top to bottom, they either weren't focused or they didn't have the mental strength to sort of play through some Cleveland runs, because when they couldn't get stops on one end, on the other end they're doing nothing but jacking up long twos or contested threes. So really it was just a mess, top to bottom, everyone on the roster. You kind of just have to bury the ball and turn the page, because there isn't a positive takeaway. There isn't any spin you can use from this game to sort of propel you moving forward.
We're getting off this game. I don't want to talk about this game anymore. And you look now towards the future. I'm serious. It's just, again, like you said, to use your own words against you, Dan, we can't learn anything from this game. Let's just get rid of it. You look towards the playoffs. Boston probably going to be a top 2 seed. They haven't locked it up yet. Cleveland locked it up on Wednesday night. Boston, again, close to doing that. You look at their ideal matchups for the first and second round. I look at that first round specifically and say, out of all the bottom teams, like, it doesn't really matter who they play. As long as they don't play the Bulls on a Thursday night on TNT, they're fine. And I'm not a big fan, I'm not a huge fan at all of the way Indiana plays. I know they have Paul George, but the rest of that roster doesn't scare me. Whatever Charlotte's doing, if they end up sneaking into the playoffs, like, that's fine with me. And I'm not really afraid of Miami either. And people have talked about that. It's like, oh, their 3-point shooting is great, and Hassan Whiteside got a bunch of rebounds. But Boston handles them really well. They went 4-0 against them in the regular season this year. They know how to handle Hassan Whiteside on both ends of the floor. And everybody else is I'm not really a killer. Like, I'm not, as much as I love Deion Waiters, I covered him in college. Like, I'm not terrified of him going bananas for 4 games out of 7. Like, that's just not my thing. Is there an ideal matchup for you in round 1 of the playoffs there, Danny?
Yeah, so I'm like you. I mean, the problem is when they have a game like Cleveland, everyone always wants to freak out and thinks, oh, because, they're not the best team in the East, they can't win a first-round matchup. Like, for me, I don't subscribe to that theory. So I think if they just play how they've been all season, that consistent level of effort and energy, none of the, 6 through 8 teams really scare me in a 7-game series. So if I have my druthers, I mean, Atlanta is slumping. I'd like to see them kind of drop a few, but Indiana, like you said, doesn't have anything outside Paul George. I think they're ready to mail it in. They're, asking to be swept early so that he can leave and opt out of his contract. So it's not until you get into that second round, which is why, that number 1 seed was important for me, because it looks like Toronto is going to lock up that 3 seed. So you go from potentially missing them altogether to now most likely having to play them in that second round, which, I think between them and Washington, we all want to play Washington just based on how they matched up.
Right. And we'll get to the second round in a second, but back to the first round. Like, if you look at that Indiana Pacers team, when they clobbered the crap out of them, at the Boston Garden the other night, like Paul George had 40 points in that game or whatever. He was amazing. Like, he was amazing. But the rest of that team, you look up and down the roster and you're like, none of these guys are going to beat you. Like, I'm not like Jeff Teague has big games always against the Celtics. And if Doc Rivers were the Celtics coach still, Jeff Teague would be a Celtic. He always kills Boston. But like, Richard Jefferson doesn't scare me. I like Miles Turner, but he's a little bit too young. Like, Thad Young's a nice player, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that really takes over a series. And just the body language in that team is garbage. I mean, you watch those guys, like, don't even like playing together, I don't think. And it's almost the same thing for the Bulls, but since D Wade went down, they've played a lot better. But again, if they're not on Thursday night, I'm not really afraid of that team. Like Mirotic, along with Rondo and Butler and whatever else they want to bring off the bench at him, like Jeffrey Laverne. Like, I'm not afraid of that team at all whatsoever. Miami's whatever. Like, I think people that are going crazy on Twitter about Boston not winning a first round series now, I think got to pump the brakes, because like the bottom half, the Eastern Conference, is really, really bad.
Yeah, but I mean, it is. They do still have to show us that they can do it, but and if they give that same effort against any of those teams like they did, on Wednesday, they're not going to win the first round, right? But for me, that's not who they are, right? They're much better than they showed against Cleveland. So having said that, I just can't see any of those really 9 through 6 seeds being able to compete without having home court in a 7-game series. I think, you play teams like Indiana, that's maybe for me like a 5-game series. You play someone like Miami, maybe that's more 6 games, but I don't think we're going to have to be shaking in our boots like we did during the title years where, their first round they went 7 games or anything like that. I don't see it.
Today's Celtics Roundtable podcast is being brought to you by the SeatGeek ticketing app. As the Celtics playoff push heats up, SeatGeek is the smartest and easiest way to get tickets to every game. With SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. And it doesn't end with the Celtics or with any other NBA game. SeatGeek also has plenty of concert, comedy, and theater tickets available too, and it's all fully guaranteed. C's are going to be in the playoffs. The Boston Bruins in the playoffs for the first time in 2 years. Red Sox season just got started. You're going to want to use SeatGeek to buy your tickets to all these events, and here's why. Listeners to CLNS Radio can support this production and get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. Here's how you do it. Download the free SeatGeek app, go to the settings tab, and click add a promo code, and enter the promo code CELTSNEWS, all one word, and SeatGeek will send you a $20 rebate after you've made your first ticket purchase. Download the free SeatGeek app and enter the promo code CELTSNEWS today. Back to Dan Greenberg.
And you look at that second round matchup potentially with Toronto. And yeah, I guess I'd be a little bit more afraid of Toronto than Washington. I don't like Washington's bench. I know they added Bogdanovich, and he's a terrific shooter. And Kelly Oubre is starting to kind of figure out where he belongs in an NBA floor. And John Wall and Bradley Beal are killers, and Otto Porter's fine, and it's great. But I look at the Raptors. I'm with you on this. This Raptors team has two stone-cold killers on it, with Kyle Lowry when he's healthy, and with DeMar DeRozan, who Boston hasn't quite figured out how to deal with. I mean, Jalen kind of slowed him down the last time they played it, but Boston still ended up blowing a 17-point lead in that game. And you look at a guy like P.J. Tucker, he's going to give them a little bit of a boost off the bench in terms of defense, and at the end of the game when they need to lock down defenders, P.J. Tucker can do that. They have, obviously, a couple of bigs that could be problems with Valanciunas and with Serge Ibaka. I mean, I just think in terms of how Boston matches up against them, it's really going to be, can Avery Bradley stop Kyle Lowry when it matters? And what does Boston do with DeRozan? Do they put Smart on him? Can Smart handle it? Is it time for Jalen's X factor potential to come through? Like, are you more scared of Lowry or DeRozan in that situation?
I'd say DeRozan just because, Isaiah is going to be able to sort of cancel out the scoring of Lowry. But what's tough is each time these two teams have played this season, neither has been at full strength, right? So one game, the Celtics are missing guys. The next game, Toronto's missing guys. So we really don't know when both of these teams have their full lineups, how Brad's going to work with his lineups and matchups and things of that nature. But we haven't seen anybody be able to, put a body on DeRozan, right? So his strength is getting into the mid-range, getting into the free throw line, and being, I think he's like 6'6" or 6'7", something like that. He has the ability to shoot over guys like Marcus and Avery. So for me, it's all about stopping DeRozan, just because I think Isaiah, for his position, is going to be able to match whatever offense Lowry has. The problem is the secondary scoring going to be able to match what DeRozan's going to give, and that's still to be determined.
I just want to wrap up with a little team-building stuff. We'll end on a positive note. Because I thought the article that Ryan Bernardoni came out with the other day for, I think, like Celtics blog or one of those websites or whatever it is, I thought it was interesting because it put kind of in perspective how successful Boston has been with their rebuild. And just a few seasons ago, you had a team towards the bottom of the league. They were tied for, fifth worst record in the league with Utah. Lost a coin flip, got Marcus Smart. Dante Exum went to Utah. Now here we are, fast forward a couple of years later, the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. When did you know that the Celtics nailed their rebuild?
So I knew when they traded for Isaiah, they were 20-32, right? So I had seen Isaiah in college. I didn't think any of us really knew that he would turn into this, top 5 MVP candidate. But if you saw how they finished that season, they snuck into the playoffs. That was the first real player that Brad had, and that first real elite talent that the Celtics had since they traded everybody away. So that's when I thought to myself, hey, okay, maybe they just needed better players. And the structure is there, the coaching is there. And then when they had the first full season and won 48 games, you said, okay, now I know that they're on the right track. So everybody is quick to say, oh, well, if you're not going to win a title, it's not a successful rebuild. But unless you're building a super team, it is extremely rare to go from being 12 games under 500 to a 50-win team, a top 2, 1 or 2 seed in just 3 years. You still have young draft picks. You still have cap space. I mean, all things considered, they've nailed it up until this point, but now they don't have that excuse of they don't have the talent, they're missing bodies. Now is when they need to take that next level, start to win a couple rounds in the playoffs. Then we can truly evaluate if this has been a successful reason.
That's going to do it for this edition of Celtics Roundtable on CLNS Radio. Big shout out to Dan Greenberg for joining us here on today's program. We'll see you guys next week. Don't forget, we're powered by SeatGeek. Celts News to help save $20 off your next purchase. See you guys later.